Okay, let's dig into this. We're talking about a common headache in modern apps, testing JavaScript that's asynchronous.
Uh-huh. Things like fetching data, timers running, database calls, stuff that doesn't happen right away.
Exactly. Your code waits, but how do you make your tests wait properly? How do they know when the async thing is actually done so they can check the result?
That's the core issue, really.
Yeah.
If your test just zooms past before the async operation finishes, well, you haven't really tested anything useful, have you?
Right. So our goal here is to explore some key ways to write tests that handle this waiting game reliably. Essential stuff whether you're, just getting started or aiming to be a real pro.
Absolutely. So looking at how this evolved, one of the earlier approaches, especially before promises were everywhere, was using callbacks.
Ah, callbacks. Often with that special done function. Right. How did that actually work in a test?
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
The testing tool would pass this done function into your test case, and your test would kick off the async operation. Then, inside the callback that runs when the operation completes, that's where you'd call done.
Ah, so calling done was the signal, like raising a flag saying, okay, framework, I'm finished now. You can stop waiting.
Precisely. But here's where it got a bit fiddly.
Uh-oh.
If an error happened inside that async callback,
Mm.
maybe the network request failed, it wouldn't automatically fail the test.
Right, because the error happens later, asynchronously.
Exactly. So you had to catch that error and explicitly call done with the error, like done error, to signal the failure.
That sounds fragile. You have to remember to call done exactly once, whether it succeeds or fails.
You got it. Forget done, the test might just hang forever. Call it twice, things get weird. It was very manual, placing that burden entirely on you, the test writer.
Okay, makes sense why people wanted something better, which leads us to promises, I guess.
Yeah, promises were a big step up.
Huh.
Testing frameworks started getting, well, smarter about them.
How so?
Well, if your test function simply returns a promise, the framework automatically understands it needs to wait. It waits for that promise to either resolve, succeed or reject fail.
Ah, so no more manual done call? The framework just watches the promise.
Exactly. The responsibility shifts. You return the async work, the promise, and the framework listens. If it resolves, great. The test passes assuming your checks pass.
And those checks, your expect assertions, where do they go? Inside a then block.
Typically, yes. You'd chain a dot then onto the promise for the success case, put your assertions there, and you'd chain a dot catch to handle potential rejections and assert on the error, perhaps.
That already sounds cleaner than managing done.
It is. And what's really neat is that many frameworks built on this. They added special matchers.
Like shortcuts.
Kind of. Things like .resolves or .rejects. You could just write something like, expect my async function .resolves.to be true.
Oh, wow. So you don't even need the dot then sometimes. You just assert directly on the expected outcome of the promise itself.
Right. For simple checks on whether it resolves or rejects or what it resolves to, it makes the test super concise, much less boilerplate.
Okay, that's a definite improvement. But things got even better, didn't they? With async await.
Oh, absolutely.
Huh.
Async await is, for many, the real game changer for writing and reading async tests. It leverages promises underneath, but the syntax...
It makes async code look almost synchronous, right?
Exactly. You just mark your test function with the async keyword. And then inside the test, whenever you call something that returns a promise, you put the await keyword in front of it.
Await fetch data, something like that.
Perfect. And the
Yeah.
magic is the test execution just pauses. Right there at the await. It waits for that promise to settle before moving to the next line.
Just like the actual code would run outside a test.
Precisely. So your test code reads top to bottom very linearly. You await the result, then you can immediately use expect on the next line to check that result.
An error handling, if the promise rejects.
You can just wrap the await call in a standard try.catch block, just like you would with synchronous code that might throw an error.
Wow. Okay. So try await potentially failing thing, catch error, expect error.toBe instance, something like that.
Exactly like that. It makes handling expected errors or just ensuring things don't error out feel very natural, very familiar. The structure is much simpler compared to nested callbacks or longs than chains.
So bringing it all together, what's the big picture here for someone learning this?
Well, it really means getting good at testing async code is it's not optional anymore. It's fundamental for building solid apps.
We've seen the journey from manual done calls
to returning promises that frameworks understand.
and finally using async await for that clean, almost synchronous style.
Each one is basically a different way to tell your test, hey, hold on, wait for this thing to finish before you check the results.
Yeah.
Understanding these different ways is key.
It definitely equips you to write better, more reliable tests and likely makes you a better developer overall.
Definitely. And that actually leads to a good question for you, the listener, to think about.
Oh.
As you learn these ways to test asynchronous code callbacks, promises, async await, how does that knowledge, that perspective of testability, influence how you actually write your asynchronous application code in the first place?
Does thinking about how you'll test it change how you design the async functions themselves? Interesting thought to ponder.